Sending data. All right. Okay. Now we're talking.
Am I unshared? Have I unshared my screen?
You have not.
Okay.
Here, I can.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I can unshare for you.
Oh,
All
yeah,
right.
okay.
All right. Here we go. We are actually live this time. Of course, you're going to have a couple technical difficulties whenever you move into some new software. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for watching the stream. Sorry, we got a couple minutes late here. My name's Eric Meyer from Generation Atomic. We have some fantastic guest speakers with us today. We have Canon Bryan, the CFO, co-founder of Terrestrial Energy, a molten salt reactor company. We have Michelle Brechtelsbauer from the Energy Impact Center, and we have Desai from the Nuclear Energy Institute. I think at the end of the day, you're gonna walk away with a little more hope for the future, some sense of what's possible in a world with high temperature reactors that are producing clean electricity, but also heat that we can use to decarbonize the other 3/4 of our emission sources. I'm super excited. Without too much further ado, here are our guests. We're going to watch this short little video to give you a sense of what can happen here, and then we'll get into it. Good stuff. Okay. All right. So welcoming our first guest, Mr. Canon Bryan. Canon, thank you so much for being here. Go ahead and share your screen whenever you're ready. I guess I'll say one more thing. Anybody who comments on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, your comments should end up here in the little side area. So please throw some comments in there. Let me know that that's working properly. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Go ahead, Canon.
Thanks, Eric. Greetings, everybody. I'm excited to talk to you all today about a subject which is a passion of mine, synthetic fuels. And I'm told that I have about 5 to 10 minutes to cover this subject matter. And normally I could go on for many, many hours talking about this. So I have also truncated my presentation. I've cut about 2/3 of it out. So if there's anyone that's really, really keen out there, you can track me down and I can send you a copy of the presentation. So let's begin. Why are synthetic fuels important? Well, the transport sector, a lot of people don't recognize this fact, but it is a major contributor to global emissions, up to 29% in the United States alone, and globally 23% of all emissions. And the entire transport sector is still well over 90% powered by fossil fuels globally. So it is a major issue. Just some statistics here for you to give you a sense of the scope of the industry and the fleets. 1.3 billion cars, trucks, and road vehicles, basically. 26,000 civilian aircraft, 20,000 military aircraft, 52,000 marine vessels. And then we have freight and passenger rail. Some more statistics here that may shock some people. I think safe to say they were pretty shocking to me when I first learned about them. The United States alone consumes around 1 trillion liters of gasoline every year. And the global aviation industry consumes about 400 billion liters of jet fuel. And of course, trains and ships typically powered by either diesel or bunker oil, which is some of the dirtiest fuels out there. So what about electric vehicles? Shouldn't that be the future of transport? Well, yes, which technically that is true, but the rate at which the electric vehicle fleet is being deployed is not quick enough. It's not going to be fast enough to give us the kind of emissions reductions that we need to meet the climate goals. So if you look at some of the statistics on this page, International Energy Agency saying that we can get to 125 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030, 10 years from now. And that would be a towering achievement, certainly. But even if we did that, it would still only be 6% of the global fleet at that time. So clearly not enough, and not soon enough. And another number which may be shocking to some and really cuts to the heart of the matter and explains why synthetic fuels are so essential. So the best batteries that we have out there that are being used, whether it be for electric vehicles or for grid scale storage, they have an energy density of 250 watt hours per kilogram. Jet fuel is around 12,000 watt hours per kilogram. So a factor of about 50 in terms of energy density. So clearly there is a major technological hurdle which is really not close to being bridged at this point in time, and not for the foreseeable future. So how do we make synthetic fuel? So there's a major part of this section which I'm not going to go into because I don't have the time. But again, if anybody wants to get a copy of this presentation, there is some more detail on how this is accomplished. But basically, just at the highest level possible, the hydrocarbons that we use as transport fuel consist of hydrogen and carbon. That may be a basic fact for some of you out there, but what it means is that if you can make clean hydrogen and you can make clean carbon, then you can fabricate hydrocarbons, and you can fabricate them cleanly. So hydrogen, of course, is found in great abundance in water, as is carbon. You can find carbon in water, or in the air, or in the exhaust from a cement factory. The point is you can extract these elements. It takes an awful lot of power to do it, to extract them and separate them using chemical processes, which is why we don't make hydrocarbons that way today. We just mine oil and refine it into the fuels that we need. But if we had an energy source that could deliver the massive amount of power that you need to do these chemical processes, then it actually starts to make sense. So that is what we or what I am proposing as a solution, is to use nuclear innovation, high temperature reactor systems that are ultra low carbon, that can be built small and at very low cost, to drive the power that's necessary to make clean hydrogen, to make clean carbon, and to combine that hydrogen and that carbon in the right formula to make the fuels that we use to power our jet airplanes and our ships and our cars and trucks. And these fuels are what we call drop-in substitutable. So the jet engine cannot tell the difference between a jet fuel which is made out of petroleum or a jet fuel which is made out of water. So the clearly this is a very, very powerful tool for decarbonization. If you're getting that carbon out of the atmosphere or from a cement plant or some emission that is already happening somewhere, then what you're doing is you're creating a closed loop chemistry with the atmosphere for carbon. And we call that net zero carbon or carbon neutral. So that is what we're proposing to do. Some of the other benefits of synthetic fuels, if you take away the fuel price volatility of oil, a lot of major impacts resonate throughout the global economy. Right now, today, the oil price is not stable. It's very volatile, and whenever it changes, it has massive impacts. And just the mere fact that it is volatile and could change at any moment is a risk. It's a risk factor, and if you were to take out that risk factor, it would have massive ramifications in the global economy. Also, when you make synthetic fuels, you don't have all of the extra junk in it that comes from petroleum, like nitrogen oxides and sulfur oxides and particulate matter. So it's a much cleaner burning fuel, besides also being a carbon neutral fuel. Some other benefits: all the technologies to extract hydrogen from water, the technologies that extract carbon from either the atmosphere or from water or from from a smokestack. All those technologies are well known, well established, proven technologies, and so it means that this combination of technologies, if they're done in the right way and using advanced nuclear technology, they can be deployed at a very rapid scale and a very significant scale globally, which is what you need. If you recall back to one of my earlier slides, the quantities that we use, the quantities of transport fuels that we use globally is absolutely immense. And the other major benefit of using synthetic fuels is that none of the infrastructure has to change. Even the aviation industry is already today licensed to use synthetic fuels, so you don't have to go through some daunting, massive regulatory process to get these fuels licensed, even in commercial aircraft. And you don't have to build a whole new fleet of jet airplanes. You don't have to build a whole new fleet of ships. You don't have to build new fueling stations, fueling infrastructure, and even refining infrastructure is some of that is similar as well. So you don't have to totally reinvent the entire infrastructure of the entire transport sector. You can just basically leave it all exactly as it is, and just input a new fuel into the system. So that's huge. That is massive, a massive benefit, because that will allow decarbonization to happen quicker. I think that's all I have for today. So thanks very much for your attention, and I hope you found that interesting.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Canon. Yeah, that's great. I think I'll just insert, maybe one question, throw it to really anyone on the panel in between each of these. And this one, I kind of want you guys to try to put it into perspective for me. How does advanced nuclear and I guess fission in general compare to other technological breakthroughs we've had throughout history? where does this rank in terms of the other great breakthroughs we've had?
Is that a question for me or for everybody? Sorry.
First person to jump in, take it. Canon, you want to start with that?
Well, it's probably on par with the major energy revolutions that we've experienced throughout history. So the discovery and domestication of fire is one of the big ones. The discovery and the use of fossil fuels in transport and machinery is obviously a huge one. I don't know that there are too many others which would rival the significance of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy, of course, not such a recent discovery, although in the scope of human history, it certainly is very, very recent. And I mean, the form of nuclear energy we have today, of course, has been tremendously useful and has avoided billions and billions of tons of CO2 and has delivered cheap energy to millions of people. But it is quite an energy inefficient way of harnessing the tremendous power of nuclear of the nucleus. And so the revolutionary technologies that are coming to market today, I mean, the primary objective is to change the economics of nuclear energy. So instead of having nuclear power plants, which are, $10 billion to construct and license, we want to deliver to people nuclear power plants which are under $1 billion. And I know Energy Impact Center is a big proponent of that philosophy as well. But being able to deliver a power infrastructure system which is financeable and constructible in a reasonable period of time, less than 4 years instead of over 8 years, and that all is made possible by increasing the energy efficiency of how we access the tremendous power of the nucleus. And that's, you could say that's another energy revolution, maybe on par with though it is in the sub framework of nuclear, the discovery of nuclear energy. The difference, I think, will between the nuclear power plant designs that are coming up today compared to the designs which were invented 50 years ago or commercialized 50 years ago may be just as revolutionary. So it is not trivial, in our opinion, let's say in my opinion and the opinion of my company, and it is a very, very significant
awesome. Thanks for that,
change
Canon.
in the energy calculus.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Michelle coming to us from the Energy Impact Center. Michelle, thank you so much for being here with us. Very excited to see what you have to present. You can go ahead and share your screen whenever you like. And yeah, we'll get into it.
All right, tell me if you guys can now see a yellow background using my screen.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, hi everyone. Thanks to Eric and Generation Atomic for inviting me to be on this virtual panel. This is actually the first time I've ever live streamed anything as a millennial, so I'm real excited about it. Glad to be here. As Eric mentioned, my name is Michelle Brechtelsbauer, and I'm the Director of Stakeholder Relations at the Energy Impact Center. And I really love this topic of nuclear for climate, because that's exactly what we do as an organization. I'm also really excited to talk with you all about our Open 100 initiative today. So some of you might be familiar with the Energy Impact Center from our Titans of Nuclear podcast. But more broadly, EIC is a research organization based here in Washington, D.C., with a mandate to explore the pathways to achieving deep decarbonization and solving climate change in a time frame that can actually make a difference. So early on, as an organization, we did the carbon math and came to realize that nuclear energy is a critical enabling technology to achieve that mission. And it's not just enough to clean the energy sector, but future energy production has to produce industrial heat, clean synthetic fuels like Canon just talked about, and power even the direct air capture of legacy emissions as well, if we're really going to solve climate. And what we found is that nuclear energy is the only technology that's capable of generating the quantities of low carbon electricity that we need to meet the world's growing energy demand and also account for its legacy, its life cycle carbon emissions. And so for us, advancing the deployment of nuclear power has been the primary focus of our organization. What we've seen is despite all of this potential for nuclear, it remains an underutilized and largely overlooked future technology in future climate policy and even in energy planning discussions. And this is obviously puzzling, right? When we feel like we have this great resource, we want to be able to utilize it. So as an organization, the Energy Impact Center started to look at this issue by conducting a critical review of the nuclear industry. We spoke with hundreds of experts and conducted a techno-economic analysis of the historical deployments in nuclear. And what we found wasn't an industry that's been crippled by politics or public opinion or even a lack of scientific ingenuity, but rather one that's been captured by a dominating trend towards larger and more complex infrastructure projects that have made nuclear uncompetitive economically. And so last year, we embarked on a new effort to course correct the industry and to set what we're calling a new foundation for energy projects that prioritize first economics and construction time. And so the result of that work is the Open 100 project, which is a platform that offers developers a blueprint with all the elements that they need to design and construct a nuclear power plant, all free, online, and open source. So rather than reinventing the core technology, Open 100 focuses on improving the efficiency of the construction process and the manufacturing supply chain. So to put it simply, we in this project are aiming to make nuclear more affordable and abundant by producing designs that are smaller and simpler. The Open 100 design is based on your standard standard pressurized water reactor, the very same workhorse that the industry has 300 in operation today, but that has been right-sized to fit in today's capital, infrastructure, and supply chain constraints. So what EIC's engineering team has put together is just the beginning. Over the next year, we are engaging with a range of scientific and industry partners around the world to contribute to the model. And it's not just for project developers. Energy utilities, hopefully through this platform, will have enough information to begin feasibility studies. Reactor startups won't have to start from scratch. They can leverage existing balance of plant engineering work. Investors will have a transparent baseline for evaluating the economics of building new power plants. And in time, the open source framework will provide a robust foundation for the development of new power plants that we urgently need around the planet. The goal here is ultimately to align all of the players in the nuclear industry around a common framework for best practices. And in turn, we hope to restore competition to the supply chain, increase financial transparency, streamline licensing, and enable multiple projects to be developed simultaneously. And all of these actions, build markets. They increase the number of shareholders and stakeholders beyond just the nuclear sector that we have today. We hope to accelerate growth and ultimately lift the cap on the potential size of the nuclear energy sector as a real champion for solving climate change. So as the director of stakeholder relations at the Energy Impact Center, I am often talking with lots of young students and folks who've been in the industry for a very long time who are really excited about innovation in the nuclear space. But what it always comes down to for me is recognizing that innovation is definitely necessary, but we can't just innovate for the sake of it. For nuclear energy to realize its full potential to fight climate change, it's likely not just going to come down to the next shiny reactor design or even the construction of the next 10 nuclear power plants. What we need is a community-wide effort, all rallying towards the same goal, working to make nuclear energy cheaper, more accessible, and more abundant. Open 100 is just one initiative that we've launched to set the stage for that future vision. Canon talked about, using nuclear for synthetic fuels, and terrestrials doing some really great work there. And I'm sure Hirsch is going to give you even broader picture of what some of the advanced reactor technology companies are doing to move this vision forward. What we want is a future where there's clean, always-on electricity that can be connected to the grid in less than 2 years from the start of construction. We want a world where we don't have to be asked to make a choice between economic growth and preserving our environment. And so, at the Energy Impact Center, we really believe that by focusing our efforts on the right challenges and also by democratizing information that this sector has held private for so long, we can unlock even more innovation and creativity that we need to achieve our collective goal of a zero carbon future. And so with that, I will stop. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michelle. That was great. I just want to ask you real quickly, what is your favorite potential application of advanced nuclear?
Actually, Canon totally stole mine. I think that the kind of looking at nuclear's potential to power this whole chain of decarbonization across all sectors, not just electricity, but industry and heat, and then also to really tackle the biggest problem that we have from climate, which is the legacy emissions that are in the atmosphere right now. And so if we can utilize nuclear to power direct air capture systems that can then create synthetic fuels and carbon negative products, then the faster we consume, the more we burn that net negative or that net neutral synthetic fuel or make plastics or to sequester carbon in products, then the more we consume, the quicker we're going to solve climate change, the quicker we're going to pull that carbon out of the air. And what I'm so excited about nuclear for is that really is that linchpin technology that can enable that vision.
Amazing. You referenced making products with sequestered carbon a lot, but there's a lot of carbon up there. I mean, sure, 415 parts per million, but there's still a lot. What kind of products we talking here?
Well, I mean, anything that utilizes hydrogen and carbon. So anything that you currently utilize oil or other fuels to make, right? So plastics is a really great example. But really, you can think of it as there's a lot of carbon up there, but that just means there's a lot of potential business to be made, right? And so if you start to, you can go to maybe talk to like Shell or Exxon and say, wow, can you just imagine if you use the same infrastructure that you have today, but just changed your input, you could really solve climate in quite a quick turnaround fashion with little changes to the current infrastructure and supply chain.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. And thanks for bringing up the oil companies too. I think, so often they're just kind of vilified, and rightly so. I mean, they've known about the potential problems of climate change for a long time, but they didn't really know what to do about it. And they saw the transition to dealing with it as a direct threat to their business. But now, I think the advanced nuclear community has offered them an out here, where a way they can continue making money without wrecking the planet anymore, which hopefully they take. It seems like there has been some signals from certain CEOs. The CEO of BP right now, Bernard Looney in particular, I know has committed the organization to going net zero by 2050, which is pretty crazy to do when all of your products are based on carbon right now. Hopefully, the advanced nuclear community can give them a pathway to actually achieving that. Thanks so much. We're going to keep moving along here with our next presenter, which is Mr. Hirsch Desai. Hirsch is a good friend of mine I've known for many years through the American Nuclear Society. Now he is working at the Nuclear Energy Institute, doing some great work there. He's done some market analysis with his colleagues there that he'd like to present today. What are the financial barriers to the advanced nuclear taking off, getting there? What needs to happen from a market standpoint to see utilities adopting this in large fashion? So Hirsch, if you are ready, you can go ahead and share your screen and take us away.
Okay, how are you all doing? I hope everyone's doing fantastic. I hope you can see my slides. Eric, if you can give me confirmation, that's...
Yep, 10-4,
okay.
We're all good.
Okay, thank you very much. So before I get started, first of all, I want to thank Eric and everyone over here for joining in on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, especially in Washington, D.C. Weather's beautiful. I'm sure all of us wish we could be outside, but here we are. But since you are inside, might as well learn a little bit more about nuclear. So I'm glad you have joined in. So with that, let me talk a little bit more, kind of frame this up. The two speakers that we've had, Canon and Michelle, have done a fantastic job of kind of telling you potential. Canon talked a little bit about a potential use of nuclear. Michelle talked a little bit about how we can actually bring that down and talk a little bit more about the next generation of power plants and how we can standardize some design. I want to take a step back, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what does it mean from carbon side of things. So if you can see my screen where I've got utility emission projections based on pledges, what I'm really trying to show here is that the utilities around the country have started making a lot of pledges on their carbon commitments. So what do I mean by that? Well, you've got certain utilities based on whether it's their shareholder pressure or activist pressure, or just them being good stewards of their community, have decided that, hey, I'm going to reduce my carbon emissions by so much by a certain year. So if you look at this graph, what we did is we took the emissions from, let's say, 2030, 2040, and 2050, and we plotted that. And again, what it shows you here is that every company has their own set of emissions, but when you stagger them up, you start seeing, okay, so the companies are really making pledges saying that I'm going to be net zero or carbon free, or 5% of my carbon emissions by a certain amount by 2050. So when you start looking at 2050 and you see how much carbon CO2 emissions that might be given off by these companies, that's quite impressive. And you kind of backtrack to what it is today, 2018, 2019, 2020, you see there's a significant amount of emissions being given off by these utilities. So what I'm showing you here is that it's only one half of the power sector in here. The other half of power sector or utilities have not made commitments, so I didn't show them here because it would just look like a flat line. But the utilities, that's about half of the utilities, have made commitments, and you can see where we are headed. What this tells me is that utilities are looking for ways to reduce their carbon emissions. How do you do that? Well, you got to look at ways to increase your carbon-free power production. There's many ways you can do that. You've got wind, solar, nuclear, hydro, geothermal, even carbon capture technologies and things like that allow us to get there. But we're going to have to really start thinking about it. And one of the best ways to do that is include nuclear in there. And the different colors that I'm showing here actually show all the utilities that have nuclear assets, so meaning nuclear power plants. So what it tells me is that if these companies did not have nuclear power plants, this graph would not be going down, it would actually be going up, because if you replace that nuclear power plant with, let's say, natural gas or whatever other fossil fuel emitting source, you're going to be increasing that emissions. So some of these companies have a leg up, and that's great, and we're very happy with that. And what we want to see is, how can we improve that? Now that they've made those pledges, how can we actually help them achieve those? And that's where nuclear and many other carbon-free sources can come in and help out. The other thing that I wanted to highlight here was states. So what you saw in the last graph was utilities making voluntary pledges. Well, here are the states. The states on this front are making commitments themselves. Absent of any federal action, states really have become leaders in this arena. And a lot of the states are coming out and saying, hey, look, I want my electricity generation in my state to be carbon free. And there are various different mechanisms you can incentivize that, from tax credits, from clean energy standards, from renewable portfolio standards, many different ways you can get there. But the goal is the same, which is that I want to have clean energy being produced in my state, and so that my residents and my ratepayers benefit from that. And at the end of the day, emissions will be reduced when you start using carbon-free sources. So those are two things I wanted to highlight. Switching gears a little bit, I did want to highlight one thing. If you look on the left side right now of this chart, which shows nuclear's role in carbon-free, in low-carbon electricity, low-carbon electricity future, you can see that the current fleet has about 100 gigawatts of capacity. Well, what does that mean? Well, that 100 gigawatts of capacity is 96 reactors. So we have 96 reactors producing 100 gigawatts. Well, so there's capacity and then there's generation. So these nuclear power plants run 93% of the time. That's tremendous. They are at 100%, 93% of the time. That's 341 days out of the year, just running at 100%, producing electricity. So these 96 reactors are responsible for 20% of the United States electricity generation. That's incredible. That's more than half of all carbon-free generation in the US. So 96 sites around the country produce 55% of carbon-free electricity in the US. That's incredible. So when I project this out to, let's say, 2050, and what you see is the current fleet, based on their licensing, start going down, as in like their license expires and they would have to shut down. Well, there's an effort to renew their license second time, so that you can actually increase the lifespan of these plants by 20 more years. It requires a lot of effort by utilities because they have to, change out pumps, steam generators, and those kind of things. But at the end of the day, these are huge assets, multi-billion-dollar assets. And if you can last them 20 more years under the safest conditions, then guess what? You benefit from that low carbon or carbon-free electricity. On the right side, what you see is that if based on electricity growth and, let's say electrifying transportation and carbon sectors, if that happens in 2050 and nuclear continues to be the 20% of the electricity generation in the US, well, we're going to need 90 gigawatts of new nuclear capacity. That's incredible. What if we increase that to 33%, one third of US electricity source? Well, you need another 90 gigawatts of electricity. And that's the message that I want to say, is that it is incredible to see when I look out into the future and, the low carbon and carbon free world is here. We're living it, and we're going to be going down that path one way or another. And when we are doing that, nuclear has a role to play. And if we do it right, it can actually benefit the entire country and hopefully the world too. And just to give you a couple of more slides here, since a couple of folks talked a little bit about economic side of things, market side of things, I did want to highlight. So when we think of nuclear power plants, all the current fleet of power plants are big power plants that you hear about. I'm sure you've heard about many different power plants around the country or being constructed around the world. That's fantastic. That's one set of power plants. I like to use an analogy of my iPhone. So if you think of my iPhone, it's the medium-sized iPhone, right? There is my fiance has a small iPhone, and that's a tiny one. It's an iPhone SE. Then I've got this bigger one, and then there is the Max version that's even bigger. These nuclear power plants are the same way. So you've got if you want a really small power plant to address your needs, let's say your demand or various different things you're looking for, we have a small version of the plant that can be there. If you're looking for a medium-sized plant, let's say small modular reactor or something that can get you 300 megawatts, 400, 500 megawatts, hey, call Canon or any of the other advanced reactor companies. They can help you out on that front as well. And those are medium sized. And then, of course, if you need big power plants, like in China, as it electrifies and starts moving towards carbon-free future, you need big plants. Well, that's when you have these giant 1 megawatt reactors that are being utilized. So with that, I did want to tell you that, look, 2 years ago, we did an analysis. Again, some of these numbers are 2 years old. We're in the process of updating them. So we'll have an update soon. But what I want to highlight is, if I look at building SMRs, which are small modular reactors, and compare them to natural gas combined cycle power plants, well, what does that mean? How do they compare? Well, you can look at SMRs and say, wow, they're very cost competitive. And again, these numbers are 2 years old. At this point, after having a lot better data and having a lot more innovation done within the industry, we can actually bring those down. These numbers would actually be further down if I look at them right now. So yes, these SMRs can be cost competitive to natural gas combined cycle plant, which is pretty much only thing we're building on a bigger scale. Certainly we're building a lot of renewables capacity, but we're also building a lot of natural gas combined cycle power plants as well. So that, again, that's SMRs, small modular reactors. If you're going to ask me, well, what about these tiny reactors, like the iPhone SE, tiny reactors, the reactors that can really remotely power, let's say, a village in Alaska or a remote island? Well, what about them? Can these reactors be cost competitive? And the answer is yes, absolutely. If you look at a lot of these communities that currently use diesel to power their electricity grid, again, it's a microgrid, and it's a small power plant. They have to bring in diesel, and especially in Alaska or in Canada. Canon lives in Canada. He can tell you this as much as, a lot about it. There are a lot of communities where, they have to truck in or fly diesel in, and there's tremendous cost to produce electricity. These microreactors can come and reduce those costs as well, meanwhile also getting rid of your carbon emissions from diesel generators. So there is a huge benefit there as well. And then finally, these non-water advanced reactors, there have been a lot of studies done as well on that front to see, hey, could these be comparable to conventional reactors? And again, I point just one study here. There are many studies, and there's various amount of research done on this front to say, how can we bring the cost down? And if I look at this right now, gosh, this looks pretty good to me, that I've got a lot of advanced nuclear companies saying, look, we can bring the cost down. We can design and build these reactors and operate them at a lower cost. So again, the point here is that we are seeing good economics here coming out of this. And at the end of the day, these reactors will really help us, not just in electricity sector, but many different sectors. And since there was a question about this, I will highlight one more thing, which is, what are the markets? Certainly, we talk a lot about US's electrical grid and powering the grid and making sure we all have power into the future. But there are a lot of other opportunities as well, including process heat, manufacturing processes. Could we utilize the heat coming out of these reactors? Absolutely. Could we produce hydrogen? If hydrogen becomes the fuel of the future, especially for trucking industry, then certainly we can produce hydrogen. There are multiple pilots going on at current nuclear power plant sites to really make that a reality as well. And I know that Canon's company and many other advanced reactor companies are actually building their plants to be flexible so that they can take advantage of these kind of things. And then, of course, there is non-grid electricity, like what I've mentioned in Alaska or remote islands or even Caribbean. So with that, I leave you with a couple of thoughts, which is that at the end of the day, we have, let me stop sharing, but at the end of the day, what I would say is that there is a tremendous need for low carbon or carbon-free electricity in the future. Nuclear has to be playing a role. If we really are talking about addressing and reducing our carbon emissions, we already have the technologies there. How can we deploy them and make them more readily available in the U.S. and across the world? If we do it together, we're going to achieve it. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Eric.
Thanks so much, Hirsch. That was great. Very much appreciate the comments there, and kind of the look to the future that NEI is producing. Appreciate those studies to actually look at where do we need to get or where does the advanced nuclear industry need to get to compete with fossil fuels right now, because as much as we would hope out of the kindness of their hearts or out of the care for the environment, some of these companies would transition more quickly to a cleaner energy system. They're beholden to their shareholders, and that's just kind of capitalism right now. So, so what are you going to do? Yeah, I thought it might be good to discuss a little bit the political, the regulatory, the financing kind of barriers that lie in front of us versus the technological ones that exist. I know we still need to do some research and development of materials and things like that. I'm wondering, maybe I'll throw this to Michelle first, and then Hirsch and Canon, whoever jumps in after her. So go ahead. She's like, unmute. There you go.
Sorry.
No worries.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Your question was on barriers.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. Well, yes, I think that it really all comes down to economics. You won't be surprised to hear me say that. As I mentioned earlier, we've seen this trend towards larger and larger construction projects that have become more and more expensive and cumbersome and require not only specialized parts for the plant itself, but also specialized construction equipment and specialized construction methodologies. And so in terms of economics, we want to think about how to ensure that the design of the entire plant, not just the reactor core, considers economics and speed to delivery first. So that's why we're so focused on ensuring that we're thinking about the best practices of the construction industry, and ensuring that when you look outside in DC, right, Hirsch can probably see this outside of his window right now, there's 5 buildings being built probably across the street from you, and these construction projects are able to go on just less than 18 months, and then the whole thing is there, right? The construction industry has figured out ways to standardize their processes, and we want to bring those same learnings to small nuclear. We don't want to make the same mistakes that we've seen with these larger infrastructure projects, where if there's an issue with, say, the largest crane in the world, we have to wait months to get that problem fixed, a new part made. In the meantime, you've got 6,000 workers on your site who all need to be paid their salaries. So yes, economics, all the way from the design to the construction, is really important. But you also brought up financing, which is also something that we are very focused on at the Energy Impact Center. It blew my mind when I learned the fact that half of the cost of a nuclear project is just from the interest on financing during the construction period. That is absolutely insane. So, we also at the Energy Impact Center, at the same time that we launched the Open 100 project, have launched we spun out a private company called Last Energy to help exactly with that issue of bringing private financing to nuclear power plant development. And you can read more about that online too.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. Yeah, it's the interest rates that some of these projects are forced to take. It's like putting it on a credit card almost. It's kind of ridiculous. There's no other large infrastructure project that has to contend with such a high amount of interest, and that's what makes the delays so costly and makes the headlines about another delayed nuclear project with ballooning expenses just the constant bane to a nuclear advocate. You're just like, well, what about? Come on, look at China. China's doing great. How about Russia? Some of these more controlled economies are where the government really plays a central role in making sure these things get built on time and on budget. they have no problem. But once we start involving some lenders who are maybe more risk averse, maybe I don't want to throw the term predatory out there, but are certain they can make a few bucks on the back of this nuclear project. That's when things seem to go awry. Yeah, but I agree. So I don't. Looks like Canon, you're unmuted. Would you like to take a swing at the barriers question as well?
I would just add to what Michelle has said about the financing. That's sort of my area. And I think I can maybe just offer to distill it down even further. And as you said, Eric, the public sector projects in places like China and Russia, they can be funded by government and they can be very efficient, and that's fine. If you have a big enough market, then that's appropriate. That's an appropriate market finance mechanism. But in most of the rest of the world, projects will not be funded by government, and that is being proven over the last few years. Even in the UK, two large projects are not proceeding. They're not carrying forward, and the reason is finance. So the answer to the big question of what is going to bring these barriers down, particularly with respect to finance, is actually very simple, and the solution itself is very elegant. If you design a system, a power system, an energy solution, which is cost competitive, in other words, economically superior to all the other energy alternatives, including natural gas, then your design, that design will be funded. Industry will adopt projects that are economically superior. That is just that's just the nature of how industry works. And all the other barriers, I think we will find magically start to vanish, because if industry wants to do something, they don't ask for permission. They just do it. If they want to fund a $700 million project, the industry wants to fund a $700 million project because they think it's going to be good for them economically and make lots of profit. They'll do that, and then the rest of it, I mean, we'll go into the details of the political underbelly, but big industry has lobbyists on K Street in $5,000 suits, and they can pull the political strings that need to be pulled to get these projects move these projects forward.
I want to push back on that for a second, because I think if you look back, industry certainly wanted Shoreham nuclear plant on Long Island to be built. In fact, they built the entire thing, and then there was a social risk, a public outcry and pushback that got none other than Andrew Cuomo's dad, Mario, to advocate for pulling the plug on the thing. Same thing, Diablo Canyon out in California originally planned for additional units, some dedicated to desalination, which would be pretty nice to have right now, both in terms of the reliable electricity and also in terms of a pretty bad drought every couple of years, it seems like. So I think while the economics piece of it is everything kind of ties into it, the social risk can drive up the cost with additional litigation. The regulatory risk is related to that social risk, I think, another cost driver. So there are kind of all these things. I mean, you start with something like uranium, which is the most energy dense thing in the universe. And we're talking an advantage over fossil fuels by millions of times in terms of what it does. But you add in all of these additional layers of scrutiny and resistance, and then all of a sudden it's the United States in 2020, where you can't compete with natural gas in deregulated energy markets. That's that's tough. So I think there is a social component, and but I love that the engineers today are like, you know what, we can make a better machine here that can overcome all of the social resistance and beat the competition on economics, even with the deck stacked against us. That is pretty impressive thing to do if they're able to pull it off, and it looks like they might actually be able to. Yeah, Hirsch, would you like to add anything to this topic?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I would add here, right? So when we talk about the cost, cost side of things, you're talking a lot about making them economical. We certainly want to make every single product as economical as possible, right? I mean, that's how capitalistic economy works. Now, especially I'll touch on the whole delays of power plant construction and that aspect of it in sense that, look, when you build a huge infrastructure project for the first time, there's a lot of lessons learned. We'll learn a lot of lessons that helps us get better at doing the next project. There's plenty of infrastructures in the US and around the world that also get delayed or cost increased because there are things that you somehow didn't predict. When you have multi-billion-dollar projects, I'm sure there are some things you might have not thought about or forgotten about, and that's okay. By doing it a couple of times, you learn the lessons, and that enables you to be better at doing it next time and reduce the cost down. I guess this way, and reduce the cost. But now, so that's on the cost side of things. Now, for these plants to be economical and profitable, again, these plants, the operators have to be profitable in order for these plants to be built and operated. You also have to think on the revenue side of things. So on the revenue side of things, I think there is to be a lot of discussion on, okay, so if the public really is interested in reducing carbon emissions and we really want to have a carbon-free energy, okay, what kind of incentives are there to do so? If I show you a picture, here, I know, Eric, you said no more slides, but I'll show a couple of slides, and that will kind of get the point across here. So if you see this image right here, it shows electricity markets. So in the US and in Canada, how you get electricity is through these service operators. And they're called independent service operators, or RTOs, regional transmission organizations. And the stuff you see in olive green there, these are the states that really regulate, and they're called regulated markets, where the states regulate what percentage of electricity comes from nuclear or from wind, solar, natural gas, those kind of things. They get a really chance to look at long term to figure out how they want their state electricity to produce. Now then, there are other things like the competitive markets, or you might have heard wholesale markets or deregulated markets. These are the things that you see in different colors here, like MISO, Mid-Continent ISO, Southwest, and New York ISO, PJM interconnections. These are the way that it works here is that whatever is the cheapest source to produce next unit of electricity on the grid, it gets taken. It doesn't matter whether it is natural gas, coal, nuclear, wind, solar, doesn't matter. If it's the cheapest, it goes on the grid. Electrons are electrons. They're stupid. They don't really know what source they come from. As long as they're there, they're there. So when it comes to these markets, they really focus on having the cheapest source of electricity. So there's a mismatch of what people want versus what is it that the markets compensate for. The markets right here, especially these wholesale markets, they don't compensate for having carbon-free electricity separately. They don't compensate for having reliable electricity that you can get for 341 days out of 365 days in a year. They don't compensate you for a situation like in extreme winter in Minnesota, where you get extremely cold weather and the power plant still runs. Like, it gets so cold that your natural gas pipeline freezes. Well, what do you do then? So there aren't mechanisms to really help these power plants make that revenue, that additional revenue. So I think there are some thoughts that we need to have as to how we improve that and create opportunities so that the market can the things that New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, Ohio, these states have gone out and plays a role for me. And therefore, I'm going to compensate them a little bit differently for what the additional aspects that they do my
All right. Thanks for that, Hirsch. I know I think our internet got a little sketchy right at the end, but your points were quite clear all the way through. So I think no need to reiterate the last 10 seconds or so. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that. I'm watching the clock here. We have to end out our stream here. We've been doing this for the last couple of weeks, trying out something. It's kind of a micro pitch contest, as it were. I had one of our donors put some money specifically to this type of activity. So we're making it rain on the nuclear advocates. I know times are tough for many folks, so this is an opportunity for us to get back, and maybe my camera will remember where my face is. It's not. There we go. Good job. All right. So I'm going to have Liz talk a little bit about this, and while that is happening, going to promote some people who are in the attendee zone to become panelists, so they can give us their 60-second pitches. Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Hi everyone, I'm the communications manager, and I just want to go ahead and start out by thanking all the panelists for being here today. It was so great for you guys to be here and share your message with us. And so we'll just kind of go ahead and jump right into the contest portion of this. If you weren't here last week, I'll just go ahead and quickly run through the instructions. So you'll have 60 seconds to give us your best pitch. And the topic for today is the case of nuclear power in the fight against climate change, which is incredibly relevant. I swear we didn't plan this. We spun the wheel and everything. I just happened to land on this very relevant topic. So you will just have 60 seconds to give us your best pitch. It's important for you to create the best pitch, because the winner will actually receive $200, like Eric was saying, which is really awesome. So it's not just going to be up to us to vote. It's actually going to be shared in a Facebook poll on the Facebook event page for this event. So go ahead and hop on over there and make sure you cast your vote. We will be announcing the winner within an hour of the end of this live stream. Just a few simple rules here. You must create all the content during the live stream, so please don't share any pre-recorded videos or anything like that. And then all the video pitches must be clearly stated and obviously relevant to the topic. We're just going to go ahead and go through, and I'll call out your name, and then I'll be keeping time. I'll put my hand up when you have about 10 seconds left. That way you can kind of get a good idea of when you need to wrap it up. However, I think last time we did this, no one actually went to the 60-second mark. So if you're a little under 60 seconds, that's totally fine as well. But otherwise, without further ado, we can just go ahead and get started here. Okay. Eric, is everybody in here? Should we?
Yeah, I can just, I'll just call off people in order, if that works for you.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, so number one, we have Mr. Dietmar Dietering, or I guess it'd probably be Datering, because I think he's German originally. Dietmar has been working with several folks at Nuclear NY to raise the awareness of what a environmental tragedy it may be at the end of the month when they begin the shutdown process for Indian Point Unit 2. So I'm sure he knows this subject quite well. Dietmar, are you ready to go, my friend? It's all yours.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we know that if we shut down existing nuclear power plants, greenhouse gas emissions go up. It's kind of a no-brainer. It takes a large effort to bring emissions back down again with renewable sources. And the costs, the money, for the environment, the resources are immense. But our next steps for decarbonization are even bigger. We want to decarbonize the existing electricity production. We want to decarbonize heating, industrial processes, agriculture, transportation. And we want to provide power to all the people, not just the rich. For these goals, we need reliable, dense, and carbon-free technology that scales big and scales fast. Nuclear power can do that, and advanced nuclear energy will expand the role of nuclear beyond electricity generation and include process heat, hydrogen, and synfuels. Nuclear power can even grow food with the help of friendly bacteria. No land needed. Ask me more about farming. Nuclear power is the most realistic path for mankind to maximize prosperity and minimize our ecological footprint.
Great. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Great. I'm trying to find my participant list again. There it is. Wow, nice. Definitely want that on full screen. All right. Thanks, Dimar. Going down the list here, we have Ben Lilly next. Ben, are you ready to go?
Yes. Great.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Ben Lilly. We all know that climate change is a huge threat to the world. We know the strong advantages of nuclear, but our messaging needs an overhaul. The nuclear industry is a conservative and practical bunch. They see nuclear provide 20% of the US electricity mix and say, we could probably provide 30%. They see people afraid of nuclear and say, we can make it safer. They're heroes, but not the heroes we need. We need a new generation to dream bigger. We must capture the hope of nuclear technology. We will create nuclear medicine to diagnose and beat cancer. We will outdo Elon Musk in space with truly fast rocket propulsion. We will triple our share of electricity to 60% and reclaim the phrase too cheap to meter. We will trumpet clean air, carbon-free from the rooftops. We must empower a new generation with the story of hope. We must transform the story of doom and gloom to one of up and atom.
Awesome. Up and atom.
Thank you.
Okay. It's radioactive, man. That's good. We should, I mean, if they're going to do a Simpsons movie, I want to see a radioactive man movie, not just as a subplot here. You know, yeah. Thanks for that, Ben. All right. Next we have, let's see, another Ben, Ben Reed. We're well stocked on Bens today, and so Ben number 2 coming up next. Ben Reed, go ahead.
Yeah, I think nuclear derived gasoline is really fantastic. It's just having uranium as so dense as and as clean to the environment is such an advantage. And just as a fuel source, I would consider carbon neutral and conflict-free fuel a premium fuel. I think it's one that you would pay extra money for. Just on the conflict-free side, just like we have blood diamonds, our oil is also kind of like blood oil, because there's all the conflict going on with indigenous and in the Arctic. There's like wars like with South Sudan and Sudan, and synthetic fuel is conflict-free, carbon neutral. So give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. Go nuclear.
Awesome. Thanks,
Awesome.
Ben. All right, next on our list we have Bryan Campbell.
I think Dietmar did really well, but all I wanted to say is if you want to go to Mars, if you want to solve climate change, if you want to cure cancer, then only nuclear technologies can do that. Thanks.
Thanks, Bryan. Okay, next we have, let's see here, scrolling down, Daniel Ramos. Daniel. Let's see if you are unmuted. Daniel, if we'll skip you for now, maybe we'll come back when you are unmuted. All right, let's give Ben DiNardo the mic next. Go ahead, Ben.
So, third Ben. Got a tough crowd here. So the thing about nuclear energy, and the thing that really draws me towards it, is the fact that it allows us to think on a much longer term time scale than what we're thinking of now. it's really important that we think of things like trying to get to carbon free or carbon neutral by 2050 or earlier so we can try to reverse climate change. But the thing is oftentimes we can think bigger than that. We can think bigger than just what we can do in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. We need to think what we can do for the next couple centuries. And nuclear energy allows you to do that because climate change isn't just going to go away when we get to zero carbon emissions. With things like melting greenhouse permafrost and the ice to seawater albedo effect and other things, global warming will continue even after we are done with reducing the carbon emissions of our country, our world. So nuclear energy allows us to think on these long-term timescales and allows us to realize that we can actually do things now that can actually make impacts far into the future. We need to not only reduce our impacts, we need to pull all of the carbon that we have emitted into the atmosphere back out of it, and that's going to take energy. So we need to produce not just de-electrify our grid, we need to produce an electricity surplus in order to fulfill a lot of processes that might be needed in order to accomplish these sorts of goals. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks,
you.
Ben. Appreciate it. All right, that's great. I think that's everybody we have for today. If you didn't get a chance, if you did enter the contest yesterday or whatever and didn't get a chance to do it, I think we got everybody on the list. But feel free to send me a message if you think we missed you. All right, so we have a few things left before we wrap up here. One is to thank our illustrious guests and give them a round of applause. So thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time. Fantastic. Next time I'll have the applause track and just like that. The second thing is we always end with a call to action here. So for that, I'm going to give the mic over to Mr. Christian Hopkins, who has been working hard to prepare a digital action in support of the Nuclear Energy Research and Development Act. That's the NERD Act, something that we think would be very helpful as part of a recovery package, as part of an energy and infrastructure bill, would go a long ways to rapidly decarbonizing our country and bringing us back from where we currently are. So go ahead, Christian, and take over.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Just going to share my screen real quick so you can see how to access this. So we know that that Congress is really tied up right now dealing with the coronavirus, obviously, and their biggest priority is to deal with that. But once we're past this and once we've moved on from this, as a nation, we really need to focus on other priorities like clean energy. And this action is basically telling our lawmakers that we need to make sure that a transition to a carbon-free energy grid needs to be a top priority. So we use one-click politics for this. And what we're basically saying is that any energy package that is passed after this needs to include research and development for nuclear energy, and that is just what the NERD Act calls for. So it increases funding for securing advanced nuclear fuel, funds demonstrations for advanced reactors, as well as other hybrid energy systems like the ones we've talked about for powering those industrial processes and synthetic fuels. And it also funds university apprenticeship and leadership programs to help prepare the next generation of nuclear scientists. So this is a really important bill. We really hope that Congress will consider it once we're done dealing with this crisis, and we would really appreciate it if you would go to this link to fill that out. It's bit.ly/NERD Act, and that is case sensitive, so make sure you capitalize NERD. If you're having trouble finding the link, reach out to us on Facebook or in the chat, and we can send you a more direct link. So I'll turn it back over to Eric. I need to stop sharing my screen, which I don't really know how to do.
I got you. I got you. No worries.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Christian. All right. I'm thinking I might click over there right now. Heck, Congress isn't going to be in session for a few days or weeks, potentially anyway. So I'm thinking I'll pop on over and email my representative, Betty McCollum, and tell her that I care about this. It's very simple to do. We also have the ability to give them a call, and there's a little script built in there. Legislative contact is so important in getting our agenda across and helping usher in this new era of energy abundance, clean energy abundance that we all want. Yeah, so I'm going to do that right after this. Hope you do as well. Also, hope you vote for the winner of our micro pitch contest on our site there. I will make sure to post that link multiple places so you can find it. What else? Oh, if you like my shirt, this one's also available on the Generation Atomic store. I'm always getting that plug in there. Well, have a great rest of your weekend. Hope we brought you some hope for the future. I know I got some from these guests. And with that, we'll be back next week and also on Earth Day with some additional streams. Let's bring some friends next time. Let's go save the world. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and take care.